Caterina Mori loved her evening walks in the public garden. After a long day of teaching, that moment was her chance to relax, unwind, and enjoy some tranquility. The park, with its winding paths and towering trees, was her refuge from the daily frenzy. The soft lights of the sunset, with the sky tinged with orange and pink, gave the garden a magical atmosphere. As she walked, she listened to the wind in the trees and the soft rustling of the leaves under her footsteps. Before continuing, subscribe to our channel and activate the bell. As the sun set, the laughter of the children at the playground faded. Families began to return for dinner, and the park slowly emptied. That day, as Catherine walked by the swings, she noticed something strange near the slides. A small figure was lying on the grass, motionless. Her heart raced. She walked quickly closer and saw a boy, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, with a pale face and labored breathing. Catherine knelt beside him, shaking his shoulder gently. "Can you hear me? Are you awake, honey?" he asked, his voice shaking. When there was no answer, he took out his phone and immediately called the ambulance, urgently explaining the situation. "There's a child who's not responding. He's at the playground near the slides." As he waited for help, the minutes seemed to stretch out into infinity. Caterina kept wondering who the child was, why he was there alone, and what had happened to him. Every second that passed seemed eternal. When she finally heard the sirens of the ambulance, a wave of relief washed over her. The paramedics arrived and immediately began assessing the child's condition. "Do you know him?" one of them asked her. Caterina looked at him carefully, trying to remember if she had ever seen him before. "Maybe he is one of my students, but I am not sure." The child was loaded into the ambulance, and without thinking twice, Caterina decided to follow him to the hospital. She felt a strong responsibility towards him, even though she didn't know who he was yet. During the journey, she continued to watch him, silently praying that he would recover. When they arrived at the emergency room, the child was immediately taken to a room for further tests. Sitting in the waiting room, Caterina felt helpless and agitated. His thoughts raced, and his gaze was fixed on the door of the emergency room, hoping to have answers soon. His thoughts constantly returned to that child. Was he really one of his students? He tried to remember the faces of his students, but none of them matched exactly. A little later, a nurse approached with a kind smile. "The doctors are doing everything they can," she said reassuringly. "Do you know him by any chance?" "I'm a teacher at the elementary school nearby," Caterina replied, trying to gather her thoughts. "I think he's one of my students, but I'm not sure." Shortly afterward, a doctor entered the room with news. "We have identified the boy. His name is Fabio, and he is a student at your school." As soon as she heard the name, Caterina immediately remembered who he was. Fabio was a shy and reserved boy, always sitting at the back of the class. He almost never spoke unless questioned, and often seemed isolated from the rest of the class. She felt guilty for not recognizing him immediately. The doctor went on to explain that a rare toxin had been found in Fabio's blood. Caterina was shocked. "A toxin? How is that possible?" she asked, incredulous. "We're not sure yet," the doctor replied. "We're doing some tests. The police have been notified and will want to talk to you as soon as there's an update." Despite the relief of knowing that Fabio was being treated, Caterina couldn't stop thinking about how it was possible that such a young child could have come into contact with something so dangerous. The next day, she decided to visit Fabio in the hospital. When she entered his room, she found him still hooked up to the machines, but his face seemed more relaxed than the night before. She sat down next to him, gently taking his hand. "Everything will be okay, Fabio," she whispered softly. "You're not alone. I'm here with you." As she watched him, she reflected on how little she knew about his life outside of school. Fabio had always been a quiet child who never spoke about his days or his family. Over the next few days, Caterina tried to understand more, talking to some of Fabio's classmates. She discovered that he often stayed in the library late, avoiding going home right away. Investigations by the police and social services revealed that Fabio's mother, Anna, worked in 3 different jobs to try to maintain an economic balance. They lived in difficult conditions, and it was suspected that the toxin came from chemicals used for household cleaning. When Caterina visited their home, she was struck by the difficult conditions in which they lived. The apartment was small, neglected, and messy. Anna seemed exhausted. "I never meant to hurt him," Anna said with tears in her eyes. "I use the products I can afford, but I didn't think they were dangerous." Caterina, deeply touched by the situation, assured her that she was not alone and that steps would be taken to help her. Social services began providing assistance, and Caterina, together with the school, organized a fundraiser to help Fabio and his family. The community responded generously, and within weeks the house was renovated and made a safer, more welcoming environment. In the meantime, Fabio was slowly starting to get better. When he woke up, Caterina was there beside him. "How are you feeling, Fabio?" she asked with a reassuring smile. "I want to go home," he replied, his voice weak but firm. "Soon you will be able to," Caterina reassured him. Fabio's eyes filled with gratitude, and for the first time, Caterina saw a spark of hope in him. She continued to follow him closely, doing what she could to ensure he received all the support he needed. In the days that followed, the community mobilized even more to help Fabio's family. The house was renovated, cleaning products were replaced with safe alternatives, and funds were made available to provide a more stable life. When Fabio was finally released from the hospital, he found a welcoming home and a supportive neighborhood. Back in a safe and loving environment, Fabio seemed happier. Caterina, now tied to him, continued to be a constant presence in his life. Even though she knew that the road to full recovery would be long, she was sure that, together, they would overcome every obstacle. Her walks in the public garden resumed, but every time she passed by the slides, she thought back to that night when she had found Fabio, knowing that she had made a difference in his life. This was what it meant to be a teacher, not just to transmit knowledge, but to be a point of reference, a guide, someone the students could always count on. Fabio was living proof that a helping hand, even in a moment of desperation, could change a life. Did you like this story? Leave a comment below. Thanks for watching the video till the end, and see you next story.